So we're going to be talking about white blood cell disorders and in what cases we're going to have leukocytosis and leukopenia and what those words even mean, and also cyclic neutropenia and something called septic agranulocytosis. So, what are the leukocytes? What are the white blood cells? Well, we have granulocytes, and these granulocytes are divided into BEN, basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils. These are our granulocytes. So these are basophils, eosinophils, and neutrophils. Then we also have lymphocytes. Then we have milia, which are monocytes and lymphocytes. Now, we have to realize that the normal number of white blood cells in our body is 4,000 to 11,000, 4K to 11K. Anything when the white blood cells go up more than 11K, that's known as leukocytosis. And whenever the white blood cells are below 4,000, that's known as leukopenia. Now, the most important things you need to know that there are certain conditions which cause excessive numbers of leukocytes, which is known as leukocytosis. And there's some certain things which cause reduced number of leukocytes called leukopenia. Now, leukocytosis is when a leukocyte count is from 4.5, okay, we already said it, it's from 4,000 to 11,000. Now, often leukocytosis is a physiological response to infection. So often you need to know that when is the white blood cell count most likely to increase. It's most likely to increase whenever there's an infection or an inflammation. Okay? And if that is so, also, it can be a parasitic infection or an infection of the bone marrow or even a bone marrow cancer, which is then leukemia. Something called a bone marrow cancer is known as leukemia. And remember, these cells are actually produced in the bone marrow. Our basophils, eosinophils, neutrophils, our leukocytes are produced in the bone marrow anyway, okay? Now, our leukocytes, they are often found marginated. That means along the vessels, along the margin of the vessels. And 95% are mature neutrophils and 5% are blast cells. Now, there's another term for when there's a high increase in the neutrophils. It's known as neutrophilia, or you can call it neutrophilic leukocytosis. Now, in what conditions do we get neutrophilic leukocytosis? You can probably guess. Bacterial infections, any kind of infection, any kind of inflammation. Okay, next, in what condition would we get eosinophilia or eosinophilic leukocytosis? Allergy and vasculitis. That's the most important thing to remember. Allergy and vasculitis will cause eosinophilia. Now, what about basophilia? What about when basophils are increased? Now, this is different. This is often in myeloproliferative diseases, often in cancers and leukemias, which we will come to. Monocytes and lymphocytes. Monocytes are increasing, especially in TB. Chronic infections like tuberculosis, so infections and cancer, and lymphocytosis increases in infection and inflammation. So neutrophilia and lymphocytosis was both infection and inflammation. Eosinophilia was allergy and vasculitis. Basophilic was myeloproliferative diseases, which we will talk about. And monocytosis, was TB, chronic infections. Okay, now, when we talk about a left upper shift, there's more and more, as the white blood cell demand gets greater and greater, the bone marrow will start to produce more and more white blood cells. But because there's a greater demand for the body, those white blood cells will not be completely mature, and they will already be pushed out into the circulation, And that concept is known as, we just see more and more young leukocytes, and you'll notice that on the CBCs, on the complete blood counts as well. Lymphopenia is when you have a decreased lymphocyte count, which occurs in immunodeficiency states. Neutropenia is when you have a decreased neutrophil count, and this is known as agranulocytosis, which is what we're also going to be talking about. Agranulocytosis is when you have the absence of granulocytes, and it's neutropenia in specific is when you have less than 0.5 to 10 to the power of 9 number of granulocytes or number of neutrophils. And the primary causes of this are when you have bone marrow issues. Now, neutrophils, remember, these cells, these leukocytes, are produced in the bone marrow. So the number one problematic location can be the bone marrow itself. And the kinds of diseases that are found here are leukemia, chronic myeloid leukemia, polycythemia vera, and essential thrombocytopenia. Now, what are the clinical aspects of agranulocytosis? Make this a subheading and really understand how agranulocytosis, by the way, is less than 0.5 times 10 to the power of 9. Carbimazole is what causes the agranulocytosis. Carbimazole is what causes the agranulocytosis. Neutropenic sepsis is just a term for the condition of agranulocytosis which occurs after something, neutropenic sepsis, and it occurs after chemotherapy, after drugs, or in a state of hyperthyroidism, in a condition of hyperthyroidism. And neutropenic sepsis is most associated with a sore throat, and not just a sore throat, and their clinical features are like anemia, basically, tiredness, weakness, fever, though, and shortness of breath. And there's also granulocyte colony stimulating factor, which can be used to treat it. Now, one more thing to talk about. Leukopenia is caused by when there's total leukocyte count is less than 4,000. And this is often caused by acute viral infection. So remember, anything that affects the bone marrow or anything that's an infection. A lot of these white blood cells are going to be affected either by these secondary causes such as infections and inflammations, or something that's like, where the white blood cells are actually produced, like the bone marrow. The acute viral infections include parvovirus B19, hepatitis E, hepatitis C, and also bone marrow suppression drugs can cause it. Now, when we talk about cyclic neutropenia, this is a rare blood disorder which is characterized by recurrent low neutrophil levels. Okay, it's in the name, but this is an autosomal dominant infection, or it's acquired, and it's due to an ELANE gene, ELANE gene, which makes neutrophil elastase, and that's an enzyme. Any enzyme that ends in A's, anything that ends in A's is an enzyme, and it breaks down neutrophils. Thanks.